Ah, the cash crunch. Have you found yourself wondering which countries might be facing financial turmoil in 2025? Well, so have we. Luckily, we've got the inside scoop on the 10 nations that could be teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. From economies imploding to governments watching their own schemes backfire, these countries are collapsing faster than a balloon running out of air. Buckle up. We're about to dive into the world of fiscal crises that could shock the globe. 1. Venezuela, a country that was once a shining example of wealth in Latin America. Boasting some of the world's largest oil reserves, Venezuela should have been thriving. However, a series of poor economic decisions, political instability, and an over-reliance on oil exports have pushed the country into a severe economic crisis. Venezuela's hyperinflation reached staggering levels, with the bolívar becoming practically worthless. This has led to mass poverty, food shortages, and widespread inflation, making even basic goods unaffordable for the general public. The government's attempts to solve the problem have backfired, leaving the country in a constant state of crisis. In addition, Venezuela's debt has spiraled out of control, and with no clear path to recovery, the nation is facing an uncertain future. 2025 could be the year that Venezuela faces full economic collapse, as the country continues to struggle with unsustainable debt and the erosion of its oil-based economy. 2. Greece, a country that has faced financial instability since the 2008 global financial crisis. Despite years of austerity measures and bailout packages from the European Union, Greece remains in a precarious financial position. High levels of government debt and a fragile economy are major contributors to the country's ongoing struggles. While Greece has made some recovery, the country's debt burden is still one of the highest in Europe. The Greek economy is heavily reliant on tourism and the service sector, which can be vulnerable to global economic shifts. The political instability, combined with the looming shadow of debt repayment, makes Greece a strong candidate for further financial crisis in 2025. With a weak banking sector and an uncertain future, Greece could find itself in the midst of another debt default, potentially leading to bankruptcy. 2025 could be the year when Greece's financial troubles reach a breaking point. 3. North Korea. This secretive regime has faced international sanctions and a strained economy for decades. Despite its heavy focus on military development, the country's economic situation is dire, with widespread poverty, corruption, and inefficiencies plaguing the system. North Korea's economy is primarily controlled by the state, and the government continues to prioritize military spending over the welfare of its people. Sanctions from the international community have only intensified the situation, leaving the country struggling to import essential goods. This has led to inflation, food shortages, and widespread hardship for the average citizen. North Korea's debt to foreign countries is growing, and its government's refusal to engage in open negotiations with the international community only exacerbates the situation. With limited resources and an unsustainable economic model, North Korea could face economic collapse in 2025 if the current trajectory continues. 4. Argentina has faced financial instability for decades, and its situation shows little sign of improvement. Known for its history of debt defaults and inflation crises, Argentina's economy is still struggling under the weight of mounting debt. The country has repeatedly entered into debt restructuring agreements, but each time, its economic problems seem to return with even more force. In recent years, inflation has soared, the currency has devalued significantly, and poverty rates have climbed. Argentina's economic dependence on agriculture and commodity exports makes it vulnerable to global price fluctuations, while internal corruption and political instability only complicate matters further. With foreign debt remaining unmanageable and no clear solution on the horizon, 2025 could be the year when Argentina faces another major economic crisis, potentially pushing the country toward bankruptcy. 5. El Salvador is another country on the brink of financial collapse. Despite efforts to modernize its economy, the country faces significant challenges. In particular, El Salvador's debt burden has grown exponentially, making it increasingly difficult for the government to meet its obligations. The country has been struggling with inflation, corruption, and an underdeveloped infrastructure. In addition, El Salvador's economy is heavily reliant on remittances from citizens living abroad, are vulnerable to external factors. This over-reliance on external income has made the country's economy unstable and vulnerable to shocks. With high levels of debt, poverty, and limited economic diversification, El Salvador is facing a tough road ahead. 2025 might be the year that the country is forced into a debt default, leading to serious financial instability. 6. Belgium. Belgium is often seen as a wealthy European nation. The country's economy is facing mounting pressures. Belgium has seen growing public debt, and its economy is struggling to maintain pace with the rest of Europe. Despite being a member of the EU, Belgium is not immune to global financial crises. Belgium's economy has been hit hard by economic stagnation and an aging population, which has resulted in rising welfare costs. The country's public debt is among the highest in Europe, and the Belgian government has had to rely on EU funds to stay afloat. Rising taxes and inflation are also hurting the average citizen, making it increasingly difficult for the country to manage its financial obligations. In 2025, Belgium may face a severe economic downturn, and it could find itself in a debt crisis, unable to sustain its financial commitments. 7. Myanmar. Myanmar, a country once rich in resources, is now dealing with significant economic challenges. Political instability and years of military rule have severely impacted Myanmar's economic growth. The military coup in 2021 only worsened the situation, causing international sanctions and widespread unrest. The country's economy is largely based on agriculture, but economic mismanagement, corruption, and a lack of infrastructure have hindered growth. Myanmar's debt has been rising steadily, and the country faces major inflation, currency devaluation, and a growing poverty rate. With political instability and international isolation continuing, Myanmar is at a high risk of financial collapse by 2025, with no clear path to recovery in sight. 8. Bangladesh. Bangladesh, while once seen as an emerging economic powerhouse, is now facing serious financial difficulties. The country has seen rapid population growth, which has strained its resources and infrastructure. Additionally, Bangladesh is heavily dependent on exports, particularly textiles, which makes the economy vulnerable to global market fluctuations. Despite progress in certain sectors, inflation, corruption, and a growing debt burden are putting immense pressure on the country's finances. Moreover, environmental issues, such as flooding and natural disasters, continue to exacerbate the situation. Bangladesh's economy could be pushed into crisis mode by 2025, with a potential default on its foreign debt, leading to widespread financial instability. 9. Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe has experienced some of the worst economic collapses in history, and its struggles continue. After a period of hyperinflation and a controversial land reform program, the country is still reeling from the effects of decades of economic mismanagement. Zimbabwe's currency was rendered worthless in the early 2000s, and despite efforts to stabilize the economy, the country continues to face inflation, food insecurity, and poverty. With little foreign investment, Zimbabwe is caught in a cycle of economic decline, unable to secure the resources it needs for recovery. As of 2025, Zimbabwe could be facing a severe economic collapse, unable to manage its debt or address the country's underlying issues. 10. Sri Lanka. Known for its natural beauty and tourism industry, Sri Lanka's economy has been significantly impacted by political turmoil, debt, and natural disasters. The country's foreign debt has ballooned, and despite receiving aid from international organizations, the economic outlook remains grim. In addition to political instability, Sri Lanka is also facing an inflation crisis, with prices of basic goods soaring. The tourism sector, once a pillar of the economy, has been severely impacted by the pandemic, leaving the country without a major revenue source. With high debt levels, Sri Lanka is struggling to repay international loans, and bankruptcy in 2025 could become a very real possibility. Conclusion. While the global economic landscape can often feel like a volatile roller coaster, these 10 nations are dealing with uniquely precarious financial situations. Whether it's debt burdens, inflation crises, or political instability, each of these countries is confronting a financial future that may very well be defined by turmoil. Stay tuned, as the next few years will reveal which of these nations will navigate the crisis and which ones will face even harsher challenges.